All right, we're recording in 250 for Unit 6. What are we covering in Unit 6? I haven't the foggiest notion. Yeah, I do. I don't know, somewhere I'll scare it up and pull it up. We did Unit 5 last week, which was our first unit after the midterm. First unit covering something other than compression. So we talked about channels and even this weird thing called expansion and feedback reduction and all that crap. I'm having lots of channels and hearing aids. Now we're going to talk about a digital feature called digital noise reduction. This is touted as the best thing since sliced bread when digital hearing aids came out. And we all remember the first year digital hearing aids came out, 1997. Widex, Senso. And the engineers were having a hissy fit from all the different manufacturers, believing that the sky is falling because Widex has digital noise reduction and we don't. And oh boy, boo-hoo, the sound of engineers crying is kind of like the Tin Man getting rusty, if you know what I mean. It's the nerd plastic in the pocket with the pens. And at any rate, their fears were unfounded because digital noise reduction was not shown to objectively improve signal-to-noise ratio. And it didn't improve speech understanding in noise. It did something else, though. It made the listener feel better. And if the listener feels better in noise and feels more comfortable, he or she's going to wear the hearing aids more. So I guess in that way it has a really good purpose. But make no mistake, it does not, repeat, not improve speech understanding in noise. And what we're going to do today is look at why and how come that is the case. So I'll share screen here and we will pull up the PowerPoint, n'est-ce pas? We will pull up this PowerPoint here and we will look at digital noise reduction. Now, digital noise reduction, the guy scratching his head. What is it about digital noise reduction? How does it work? Well, let's look at this. There's a couple of types of digital noise reduction. Doing it is easier than saying it is easier than doing it. I'm just going to kind of scroll down here, see what we've got in this PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, let's see. Oh yeah, this is going to be a good one. Yeah, we'll have fun here. Okay, back up to home. All right, let's look at our notes. And digital noise reduction. Read that Venema guy, chapter 8, pages 290 to 311. Digital noise reduction, DNR. Look what it says in line number 1, right off the bat. DNR gives subjective comfort for listening in noise. Subjective means the heart. That's what you feel. Make sure you like it. But it doesn't objectively improve speech recognition in noise. Most digital hearing aids have it. Not all, but I think just about all of them use it. Digital noise reduction is almost used everywhere. What does it say in the next line? Digital signal processing, DSP, algorithm for digital noise reduction uses math. Numerical calculations. What else is new? I mean, that's what digital does. The Widex Senso was the very first company to use it. Everyone thought Widex had the huge lead. The year was 1997, and I'm reading right off of the notes. The original promise, held in high hopes, was dashed. 1998, it was shown that DNR, digital noise reduction, did not work as well as planned, and this is why directional microphones had their renaissance. Look at that. They were resurrected or had their renaissance. Renaissance is a weird word. Look at this word here. You know what that word means? Rebirth. Naissance in French is birth. Okay? Prenatal, natal, naissance is birth. Renaissance is rebirth. Born again, healed. Okay? A renaissance. So D-mics were discovered way by the US military, World War II, used decades ago in hearing aids, but then they were sort of forgotten about. And they just fell asleep. People talked about D mics very little in the early 1990s, late 1980s. I remember this well. A couple of hearing aids had directional mics, but it didn't work very well. But then in 1998, holy cow, all of a sudden these manufacturers who were using digital technology, they started doing this backstroke, throwing D mics on all their hearing aids, realizing that DNR didn't work. Digital noise reduction didn't really cut it. D mics did. But so now you've got the head and the heart. Now you've got the science and the art. Okay, D mics is the science, DNR is the art. D mics is the head, DNR is the heart. You need both to be a person. Okay, so they have very different roles. And after next week, we'll talk on D mics. We'll discuss D mics and how they work more, okay? But right now, we'll cover DNR and get it out of the way. And we'll spend 2 weeks on this stuff because it's really weird. We'll just kind of take a tour here. We'll play. All right. So, 1998, digital noise reduction, the year after digital hearing aids emerged, okay? It was found not to work as well as planned. This is why directional mics were resurrected and had their renaissance. Now, in history too, the Renaissance is kind of neat. The Renaissance took place in the 1500s. And that's when the arts and ancient stuff of Greek and all the older stuff was rebirthed, and the arts got a shot in the arm after the dark Middle Ages, where it was thought that nothing really much happened. The Renaissance, boom, popped up new life. You had Michelangelo and what do you call it? Who was the other guy? Michelangelo, the sculptor, and Leonardo da Vinci, and all these artists. The Renaissance, So D mics really did go that. They were there, then they died out for a while, and then came back. And the significance of their rebirth was because of the fact that DNR did not improve speech recognition the way Widex thought it would. So let's look at the types. So that's my preamble about it. Now let's look at the types that have been used. Spectral subtraction method, A. Another type, phase cancellation method, B. And then you got another type here, spectral enhancement method. So let's just check these out. We'll just look at these and take a tour. And instead of showing the boring writing, we'll go into the PowerPoints. So now, there's your three types: spectral subtraction, phase cancellation, spectral enhancement. Well, let's look at spectral subtraction first and why we don't use it. How come it doesn't work? Look at this. Here's the spectral subtraction method, and we'll show you pictures in just a sec, okay? But look at this. Spectral subtraction method, and you think about it, the idea behind it is pretty smart. You measure sound in a noisy environment. So let's say you're in a cafeteria, and you're trying to talk, and you're in a noisy cafeteria. Someone's measuring the spectrum of the speech and the noise together. Now, what is a spectrum? A spectrum is, there you go, frequency on the horizontal, amplitude on the vertical. Remember, time is not included in this. Remember the two ways to represent sound: waveform, spectrum. And remember that a spectrum is like a slice of bread. So you've taken a slice of the loaf and turned it sideways to see the raisins. Now here you go. Measure the speech plus noise spectrum. Oh, I have no space here. There you go. Measure the speech plus noise spectrum. So you're measuring the speech you want to hear plus the background noise at the same time in the noisy cafeteria. Then, during pauses in the conversation, in other words, between sentences. So as soon as the talker shuts up for a split second, you've got just the background noise. So they measure, what's the spectrum of the background noise without the speech? And then number 3, take the spectrum of speech and noise together and subtract just the spectrum of the noise that you picked up between the sentences. And theoretically, that would leave you with just the spectrum of speech. Okay, so you got A and B, and then you take B, and then you take B and you subtract it from A and B, and you're left with just A. I mean, it sounds logical to me. And the idea had its heart in the right, it was smart. It was like, the problem is, noise spectrum is wide, and so's speech. They're both wide. Let's look at an example of, here's speech and noise spectrum. The red is the speech spectrum. And look at the two cat's ears, the yellow points sticking up. Let's pretend that the background noise was two different frequencies and they were narrow bands of noise. So you had one narrow band of noise here and another narrow band of noise here. So guess what? I mean, tomorrow's Halloween. We can look at, here's this spectrum of speech with its two little devil horns. Okay? So this is the spectrum of speech plus noise. Okay, speech with its 6 dB per octave roll off, and you got yellow, narrow bands of noise. Now, then they'll measure the noise between the sentences. So this is just the spectrum of noise between pauses of speech, for example, between sentences. And you'll see two narrow bands here, for example. So then if you take this, okay, you subtract the noise between the speech pauses from the speech and noise spectrum together, it'll leave you with the dotted line. In other words, take this, the combination of the speech plus the noise spectrum, then measure just the spectrum of the speech between pauses of sentences. So subtract the yellow from the combo of both, and you'll end up with this. You lost some here, and you lost some here, but the main part is still left alone because your noise spectra was narrow. It was just these narrow things here. So if the noise is narrow band in nature, sure. I mean, if the noise is only or some little narrow band, great. Then I can take the speech plus noise spectrum, subtract the spectrum of the background noise between pauses of the sentence, and you're left with A plus B minus B. You're left with A. Sounds perfect. Well, in a perfect world, that would happen. But guess what? The problem is, so the resultant speech spectrum, theoretically, if you did this minus this, so that you were left with the dotted lines, basically, you had the original speech spectrum and what you had left. And this is not bad because the dotted line comprises quite a bit of the original speech spectrum. So not much was lost. Trouble is, noise spectrum is often very wide. It's not these narrow little cat's ears. Okay? Most background noise spectrum is really wide. Look at this. It almost looks like an elephant. Here, I just drew that there coincidentally. God knows why. I don't know. Smoke another one, Ted. It's legal up here in Canada. Anyway, so now you've got the speech and noise spectra together, and this is more the reality. This would be in a restaurant, because in a restaurant or background speech babble, clatter of knives and forks, you've got a wide background noise spectrum. And the speech spectrum is still in red. The background noise spectrum is also wide. So here's your combined speech and noise spectrum. Here's your noise spectrum measured between pauses in speech, between sentences. So you're going to take A and B minus B, and what are you going to end up with? Bugger all, because look what you got now. You cut everything out. You did this, the combo, minus the noise spectrum, and because both spectra were wide in the first place, you were left with just about nada. Here's your original speech spectrum, and this is what you got after spectral subtraction. Basically, you threw the baby out with the bathwater. And that's why the spectral subtraction method doesn't work. Reason? One sentence. Because the spectrum of noise is wide, and it's just as wide as the spectrum of speech. Note the spectrum of speech. It's good for us. The spectrum of speech, okay, It's more in the vowels, less in the high-frequency consonants, right? It's like pink noise. It has that drop-off. The speech spectrum always has a very unique shape to it. Anyway, I've got a pumpkin to carve after this. So, okay, so look at how the original speech spectrum got completely reduced by the spectral subtraction method. It's a nice idea in its head, but it can't work because most of the time, background spectrum of noise are not narrow bands like this. This would only work if the background noise was, let's say, a circular saw or some particular type of noise, but most background speech babble or traffic noise is very broad in spectrum. Very broad, much like my elephant friend here. Okay, good. Second approach, phase cancellation. Now, phase cancellation works on the waveform, not the spectrum. So let's look at these waveforms. These are sound waves. And what are the axes of a waveform? Time and amplitude. Whereas in a spectrum, it's frequency and amplitude. So now we're looking at a different modality. You're looking at the sound waves, okay? Sound phase cancellation. When you look at the title, phase cancellation, and look at these two sound waves, they're completely opposite in phase, aren't they? So when you add them together, you're going to get the sound of one hand clapping. Silence. So this plus this is this. Nada. Okay, here's the approach. The exact time waveform of noise is measured. So you're measuring the sound wave of the noise, not the spectrum, but the sound waves of the noise. In the cafeteria again. And then they invert the noise phase and add it to the original one. So here's your noise sound wave. Then the digital hearing aid makes an equal and opposite waveform and adds it to the noise spectrum. And what do you get? No noise. Well, that's great in noise reduction headphones. Fantastic idea. No kidding. But what's a hearing aid picking up with its microphone? It's picking up both the speech and the noise, isn't it? So if you're sitting there in a noisy cafeteria and I'm wearing hearing aids, where are the mics? Right up here, right up here. And what are they picking up? They're picking up the background noise as well as the speech I'm trying to hear from the person across the table from me. So if I use this approach of phase cancellation, this is going to be the spectrum or the waveform of everything, the noise and the guy I'm trying to hear. And then if I flip that upside down, I've thrown the baby out with the bathwater as well. Nothing, it doesn't work. So let's look a little closer at that. Because you know what, Angela? You are going to get clients coming in called engineers. They're the worst. Be afraid. Now don't. You know why? And they're going to ask you this. Well, I've got a set of Bose headphones. They're noise reduction headphones. I wear them on the plane all the time. They cut the background noise, no problem. How come your hearing aids can't do that? I only paid $200 for these Bose headphones. Now you're asking me to drop $2,500, $3,000 a piece for the hearing aids. You're crazy. That's what they're going to say. How come the noise reduction works in headphones? And how come why don't you use that in the hearing aids? So let's have an answer ready for that person because there's a reason why. And one reason why is what we said already. When you're wearing the hearing aids, you're picking up the background noise in the cafeteria, plus you're picking up the speech you're trying to hear. And if you flip the phase up, if you invert the phase, you've canceled out both. So how come that doesn't happen in headphones? What do headphones got that hearing aids ain't got? So let's look at that so we can answer our friend, the engineer. Because if you can answer our friend, the engineer, you will likely make a sale, okay? Because then the engineer goes, oh, she's pretty good. Yeah, I never really thought about that, but she's right. Huh. Phase cancellation, it says in yellow, is used in noise reduction headphones. Why not in hearing aids? Because in headphones, the speech is sent directly to the eardrum from the headphone. Here we go. Because in headphones, the speech is sent directly to the eardrum straight out of your headphone that you're wearing on your ear. The noise is sampled by a microphone on the side of the headphone, like on the outside of the headphone. So the inside of the headphone is delivering what you want to hear, and a mic is on the outside of the headphone is picking up the noise. Digital hearing aids don't have this luxury. Both the speech and the noise are picked up by an outside mic. Let's look closer. Here is a headphone. No, it's not a pretty headphone. It's an ugly old TDH circumoral headphone. It's the best I could do. Just look at the idea. Read in yellow why phase cancellation can work in headphones but not in hearing aids. Here goes. The blue arrow, that's the speech you want to hear. It's coming straight out of the headphone, going down your ear canal, hitting your eardrum. Fine. Look at the red arrow. The red is noise from the outside competing. It's leaking into the ear canal and mixes with the speech. So there's your background noise trying to wreak havoc with you hearing the speech. So you're sitting in an airplane, you're wearing the headphones, and the surrounding noise from the seat where you're sitting, just the noise in the airplane, is leaking in, plus you're trying to hear the movie through the headphone. Now look at the red dot on the outside of the headphone here. That's just my schematic of a mic on the outside of the headphone. Okay, so the mic on the outside of the headphone is also picking up the noise, and that's the black arrow. So you've got sound noise leaking in from outside. That's what you want to get rid of. And you've got this mic picking up that same noise. And what does it do? Look what it says at the bottom. Inverts it in phase. So the mic is picking up the same noise that's leaking in and competing with the speech you want to hear, but the mic is flipping the phase, inverting it. So now the red arrow noise is now mixed with the black arrow inverted phase noise. Bob's your uncle. The noise is canceled out, and the speech that you want to hear is more audible. Okay? Once again, hearing aids don't have that luxury. Their microphones are sitting there, and they're picking up both the speech and the noise. There's not a separate mic picking up noise and then another sound just coming out of the hearing aid. I mean, hearing aids aren't headphones, okay? So when you've got a headphone set, you've got the luxury of saying, hey, what I want to hear is coming right out of the headphone, and meanwhile, background noise is trying to get in. So I'm going to have a mic on the outside of the headphone that inverts the phase of the noise, so the inverted phase of the noise can be put against the original noise, canceling out the noise, leaving just the speech. This is something all HISs should be able to verbally say to someone, because you're going to have it. 100% it's going to be asked of you. You're going to get clients who are sort of smart, and they're getting hearing aids. They know they have hearing loss, but they've got a real legitimate question. They're going to ask you that. And if you're sitting there going, blah, 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 I'm not really sure if the tech, they're going to walk out of your shop, you know, because they're going to say, you're ripping me off. I'm paying $6,000 for a pair of hearing aids, and they're not cutting out the noise the same way my Bose headphones are. So it's very important that as clinicians, we have a grip on some of the technology. And not that we're engineers, because we're not. I don't know how to invert the phase of sound. I'm no engineer. I'm just a guy who lives in a van by the river. But I need people to know that I have an idea as to the basics of why. And that's what we need in our field, is HISs that can stand and deliver and just say, hey man, take a chill pill. Headphone speech is sent directly to the eardrum from the headphone. Noise is sampled by a mic on the outside of the headphone. Digital hearing aids don't have that situation. Both speech and noise is picked up by the outside mic. So if I try and flip the wave upside down, I can do that with headphones like this, but I can't do that with hearing aids because I'll knock everything out. Okay, let's go to number 3, spectral enhancement, the third way. So the first way doesn't work. The second way won't work in hearing aids, so now let's try something else. All right, here we go. The digital algorithm. Again, this is all in digital hearing aids. Analog hearing aids don't have any digital noise reduction, never could, never would, okay? Spectral enhancement. The digital hearing aid detects spectral speech cues in noise, such as fundamental frequency and harmonics, or vowel formants, or high-frequency sibilants. Let's talk English. Fundamental frequency is the lowest frequency in your voice. So what's fundamental frequency in a complex sound? The first one. All the other ones are harmonics, equal multiples of the fundamental, or the fundamental. So the fundamental frequency of a male voice is about 125 hertz. The fundamental frequency of Angela's voice is probably 250 hertz. The fundamental frequency of a baby's voice is about 400 to 500 hertz. Okay, it really hurts. Now, so fundamental frequency. So the hearing aid uses artificial intelligence going, hey, does the sound have 125 hertz in it? Does it have 250 hertz in it? It's probably a human voice. Could be a human voice. Ooh, and what are the harmonics? Oh, yeah, okay, so if it's got that fundamental frequency and those kind of harmonics, it's probably speech. Okay. And then, what are formants? That word, formants. When you look at that word, those are resonances of the vocal tract. Resonances of your vocal tract, your throat. Okay, so formants are resonances of your face. Okay, and it's kind of an interesting one to look at, but at any rate, and so the hearing aid's going, hey man, does it have resonances that are typical to speech? So does it have fundamental frequency in the harmonics? Okay, that's one thing. Does it have the resonances that are often found in speech? Ooh, that's another thing to seize on. And third, does it recognize sibilants? Sibilants are the letter S. Sibilants. What are fricatives? The letter F. Fricatives, sibilants, all these, okay? So it has all these speech-like qualities. The hearing aid's artificial intelligence is going, I'm looking for sound, and if the sound has speech-like qualities, the fundamental frequency of a male and female voice, the harmonics, the formants, the sibilants, the fricative, if it's got all that stuff, I'm going to amplify the crap out of it, because that's speech. And that's what spectral enhancement is. So let's look at it. The digital algorithm detects spectral speech cues in noise, such as fundamental frequency, harmonics, vowel resonances, high-frequency sibilants, and it deliberately enhances or amplifies these spectral speech cues. It's just a different approach from noise reduction. It's just, instead of trying to get rid of the noise, it's trying to amplify the speech. Okay, so instead of trying to decrease the noise, it's saying, no, leave that approach alone. Let's increase the speech. Either way, the idea is to increase signal-to-noise ratio. Either way, that's what you want to do. One's got its emphasis on a different syllable. Okay, this one here is speaking Polish, this one's here is talking German, but the goals are the same thing. Either try and decrease the noise or try and increase the speech. That's spectral enhancement. Let's look at spectral enhancement here and why that one didn't work. The challenge for spectral enhancement, however, is the high frequency consonants. The high frequency consonants are, as we've all known in acoustics class, those are the bee's knees. Okay? The high frequency consonants tell you what the word is. So if I'm saying hat, fat, bat, cat, mat, sat, all of them have that's the vowel. The vowels are cheap. It's the that tells you what the word was. And the challenge for spectral enhancement is the high frequency consonants. Here, watch this. In noise, here's a sound wave of speech. It could be, my father can beat your father at checkers, and I know your mother wears army boots. Okay, so this is the sound here on the left, and then it gets really soft, and then it gets louder, and it gets soft, and then it gets louder here, then soft, louder here, then soft, louder here, then soft. Okay. In noise, read in white with me, in noise, the valleys between the peaks are filled with noise. The peaks are thus less prominent. Here, look at this. Okay? In noise, so look at that gray bar, that's noise. In the valleys between the peaks are filled with noise. This speech by itself, this speech in noise. But look what's more, look what stands out. What's still above the gray bars? The louder stuff, right? So this is the louder stuff right here, and the louder stuff right here, and a little bit here, and a little bit here. Hey, what are the loudest parts of speech? The vowels. Who cares? They're not what tells you what the word is. It's the consonants that tell you what the word is. But the consonants are soft. The consonants are these guys. And here, and here. Consonants are soft because they're high frequency and they're softer. So when you're looking at spectral enhancement, what still stands out with the noise plus speech waveform, you've got just the vowels are louder. So if you're going to be, here, low frequency vowels are more intense. So these still stand out. It's easier to enhance these, but who cares? Because that's just giving to the rich more. They're already audible, but vowels don't tell you what the word is. It's the consonants that do. And it's the consonants that are buried in the noise. So the spectral enhancement method is giving more to the rich, but the rich don't need it. Okay, the vowels don't need any more amplification and they're the only thing that's left to amplify. The consonants are buried in the noise, so that didn't work either. So now what do? How now, brown cow? We use an amplitude modulation approach, AM. And when you think of AM radio, AM means amplitude modulation. And what is amplitude? The size of the wave. And what's modulation is, how does it change over time? Modulate, how does it modulate? Okay, the background noise, like a fan or an air conditioner. What does a fan do? Does a fan go, no, a fan goes, what does an air conditioner do? Does an air conditioner flap its gums like I am? No, an air conditioner goes, right? Noises that are steady state go, it's only the sound of me that's going, speech is weird. Dogs and cats must be laughing their heads off at us. Because here we are standing, an animal standing on 2 feet, not on 4 like them. And whereas they meow or bark, we're going, they can't understand what you're saying, but they're both looking at you like, okay, you're weird. All right, so speech is a weird stimulus. Unlike most sounds, it changes rapidly over time. That's what's so weird about speech. Fans stay the same intensity over time. Air conditioners, same intensity over time. Even the background speech babble, why we use the word hubbub or babble. We use those words because They sound like this, like what they're talking about. Babble, 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 hubba, bubba, 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 bubba. Okay, so you get conversational party noise. So you got a big cocktail party, and you just listen to all the people gabbing in the room with their drinks in their hand. Hey, did you see that work of art? Isn't that special? While stars sit in bars and decide what they're drinking, they drop by to die because it's faster than sinking. I didn't make that up. It's Neil Young. Anyway, so you got a whole bunch of people, and they're all yakking in a room. That's going to sound like, and even that intensity is fairly steady over time. Even that's kind of like a fan or an air conditioner. So it's the sound of a single person talking close up. That's what has the sound wave that changes rapidly over time. Whereas most noises, fans, air conditioners, even background cocktail speech babble, all of those, the sound waves stay pretty stable over time, fairly stable over time, compared. So here, let's draw a picture of it so you can see it. Amplitude modulate. I hate that black bar. Go away. Thank you. In today's digital hearing aids, we use an amplitude modulation approach. Sometimes we use some spectral enhancement. Sometimes we use that as well. But the AM approach, amplitude modulation, read and then we look at the pictures. A digital signal processing algorithm characterizes the waveforms in each channel. So you got a 10-channel hearing aid. This is being done in each channel. You're looking at, what does the waveform look like? What does the waveform look like? Is it steady in time or is it rapidly changing in time? Noise has a fairly flat waveform. Okay? Noise has a fairly flat waveform over time. Speech, on the other hand, its waveform fluctuates like a snapping flag in the wind. Okay? Speech waveform fluctuates like crazy. So if noise is sensed in any channel, the gain is reduced by some 5 to 20 dB. In other words, if steady amplitude sound is picked up in any channel, the noise is reduced. And the spectral enhancement method is somewhat employed. If speech-like characteristics are found in any channel, then the gain is increased for those channels. So we use kind of a combination between amplitude modulation and spectral enhancement. But remember, spectral enhancement isn't really working all that well either. Okay? Spectral enhancement ain't really working all that well either. So this is not a panacea. It's not a big gift from God. It's kind of like it's an approach that's kind of used. But let's look at amplitude modulation. Here it is. Background noise would be on the top. There's its waveform. Fairly steady in intensity over time. I've made it fluctuate a little bit just to kind of, okay. Now look at speech. Speech is, wow, 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 wow. It's staccato, the Italian word in music, staccato. It's choppy. So speech in quiet has more modulation. Background noise, there's less modulation. And that's basically how, so if the sound coming into the mic looks like the top sound, the hearing aid goes, that's probably noise. Reduce the gain. If the sound coming into the hearing aid looks like this, the hearing aid says, don't reduce the gain. And sometimes spectral enhancement is used to try and make the speech a little bit louder, so a combo between the two methods is used. But the bottom line is digital noise reduction does not objectively, statistically, and percent-wise improve speech recognition in noise. It doesn't work. It throws the baby out with the bathwater. Amplitude modulation is a nice idea. Once again, it's better than a kick in the head. It's better than the poke in the eye with a sharp stick. It's not a bad thing, but the reality of it is it does not improve speech recognition and background noise. It just can't do it. Let's see where we are in our notes now and where we've caught up to this, just so that we're all there. We're making good progress here. Look at this. We've covered A, B, and C, spectral subtraction, phase cancellation, spectral enhancement, and then today's hearing aids use amplitude modulation with a little bit of speech enhancement added to it. Now, you've got some real weird details here, and don't think that you need to know this, okay? I'm going to highlight what I'm talking about. Please don't think I'm never going to ask that, because if somebody asked me, I'd have to say, let me look at my notes, okay? So if I have to look at my notes, I'm certainly not going to make you read exam on this. Here's what I want you to know. Noise has a fairly flat waveform, steady intensity over time, lots less amplitude modulation. In contrast, speech has rapidly fluctuating waveform. So if a channel in a hearing aid contains lots of noise, that is, less amplitude modulation, then the gain is reduced in that channel by some 5 to 20 dB. Most digital hearing aids provide progressively less gain in any channel as the amplitude modulation decreases. In other words, as the sound looks more and more like noise, you're providing less and less and less gain. The unique time waveform of speech creates an odd statistical distribution of intensity. Let's see how far. Oh yeah, look at this. Okay, my gosh, we're doing real well. We're getting through this topic in 1 week. It's not going to take 2. We're going to be done this week. This is perfect. Okay, where are we in our PowerPoints here? How far have we got? We're at 19 out of 25. Let's just see where we are going today. Yeah, sure, we got this puppy nailed. Here we go. Okay. Now, this is called statistics. Don't freak. Look at the green bell. See that ding dong? Okay, there's the bell. Teachers in school would grade on a curve. Look at the distribution here. Let's call this grades. Here, I'll pretend here. Pretend that the horizontal axis is grades from a first grade school teacher or third grade school teacher. A's, B's, C's, and D's. And the vertical axis is how many kids got those grades. Well, in most classrooms, a few kids got A's, most kids got B's and C's, and a few kids got D's. Follow me? Good. Okay, that's called a statistical distribution. It's a bell curve. It's a normal. That's what you could call the distribution of noise intensity. A fan or an air conditioner, most of the time, call this percent of time and call this X intensity. A fan or an air conditioner, most of the time, is at one particular intensity. Isn't changing much. Isn't changing much. Okay, a little bit, but not much. Now look at the orange. The orange is how much the intensity of speech is changing. So the dBSPL, the intensity level of speech. And the percent of time, read what it says on the vertical axis, percent of time that the intensity is at some particular level. Well, with background noise, it's a nice bell curve, mostly here. But with speech, because it's so staccato, chop, 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 look at how it's crazy. Its whole distribution is like wacko. Okay, speech, single talker, a very abnormal distribution of intensity. Its intensity is all over the place. There's no rhyme or rule to it. And this is why Now we look at the long-term average speech spectrum and make sure we know what LTASS means. LTAS, long-term average speech spectrum. This is the average intensity of speech over frequency. So here you go, the mean average of vowels and consonants. Softer. Vowels is louder and lower. Here's the frequency, lower in frequency and greater in intensity. And high frequency consonants, higher in frequency and softer in intensity. But notice how the mean average is not in the center of the range. Notice how this solid line isn't right between the top dotted line and the bottom dotted line. Why is there a top and a bottom dotted line? Because speech shifts in intensity. There's different intensities of speech. It's not always exactly this much at the vowels and this much at the consonants. There's a shift happening. Shift happens, okay? So you've got some variation here. So because of that variation, the mean sits between the loudest parts of speech and the softest parts of speech. Okay, but because speech is so staccato, because speech has this weird distribution of noise intensity, in other words, because the intensity of speech fluctuates like crazy over time, because it's doing this bottom wave instead of this top wave, therefore, you don't get a bell curve of intensity. No, you got this orange crazy distribution, and because of that, the mean doesn't sit in the middle of the range. Now you will notice this when you start taking your next course next semester in real ear measurement. Because when you take real ear measurement in 250, which is a spring semester course, you're going to encounter this again. You'll see this one again and you'll go, been there, got the t-shirt, I know where I've heard this before. That's what I want you to be able to do. Not that you got to sit there internalizing all of this now. I'm telling you this in terms of hearing aids and digital noise reduction, because what a hearing aid is doing is saying, hey man, it's using statistics. And it's saying, is the mean not halfway in the range? Therefore, it must have a weird distribution of intensity. Therefore, yes, it must have a really changing, rapidly changing staccato intensity. Therefore, it must be speech. Therefore, amplify the crap out of it. And if the sound is like the top coming in, oh, it's got a fairly normal distribution of speech intensity. Most of the time, it's at this particular intensity. That must mean it's noise. Reduce the gain. Okay? And that's how your hearing aids are using artificial intelligence. They literally are. They're using math. They're using statistics. They're looking at the waveform. Is it choppy? They're looking at the distribution because they're using, it's all math. That's what digital algorithms are. And they're saying, is the mean in the center? Oh, it must be noise. Oh, is the mean not in the, oh, it must be speech. It's all, okay? Not that you and I have to sit there memorizing how they do it, because I wouldn't have a clue. I just need to know the basic outlines of it. Good. Now let's take this baby home. All right, here we go. That would mean it's sometime today, Ted. Okay, when you see real ear next semester, you're going to be looking at stuff called an SPLogram. And you're going to see normal hearing plotted like this. 0 dB is going to be plotted as a curvy line because you're going to be talking dB SPL. And the guy's thresholds, you know how they go down in an audiogram? Well, now they're plotted up because your decibels are increasing as you're going up. And then you'll see asterisks, loudness discomfort levels. So here's the guy's thresholds. This is his floor of hearing. This is his ceiling of loudness tolerance. Okay? Normal hearing is on the bottom. So I've got a big dynamic range. Look at the distance from the dotted lines to the asterisks. And when I have hearing loss, my floor is elevated, but my ceiling hasn't changed. And look at LTAS. Look at the blue. There it is. That's this. Okay? And notice how the mean isn't in the center of the range. And note what parts the client can hear. The client is able to hear the low-frequency vowels. The client is not able to hear the high-frequency consonants. Those are below his hearing thresholds. And what we need to do is lift these up where they belong, where eagles fly, all that crap, okay? So you want to take this long-term average speech spectrum and literally lift it up. And that's what you're going to be showing clients with their hearing aids. You are able to see what they hear by doing real ear. So that's what I meant by you will encounter this again. You're learning about it here because that's how digital hearing aids determine whether something's noise or speech. Okay, but you're also going to be learning it in real ear in terms of your goal is to make this blue banana here sit right where my cursor is. So, noise reduction with just one channel. Pretend you had a digital hearing aid that had one channel, a one-channel digital hearing aid, and you're using digital noise reduction. What would that do? That would simply be doing this. If the noise reduction kicked in, you'd get the dotted line. If the noise reduction didn't kick in, you'd have the top solid line. Call this the frequency response of some fictitious hearing aid, just a Ted Venema made-up hearing aid. Frequency response with no digital noise reduction. When the digital noise reduction kicks in, oh, then you got a reduction. Well, geez, how is that any different from turning down the volume? All you did was reduce the gain for everything. That's why digital hearing aids don't have one channel, okay? Digital hearing aids today have many channels. So noise reduction with many channels reduces gain over smaller frequency regions. So pretend the noise was picked up in these channels. Then just these channels reduce the gain. Or if the noise is picked up just in these channels, then just these channels reduce the gain. Or if noise is picked up in these channels, then just these two have reduced the gain. Know what I mean? Okay? So this is more better than that because this is just a drop of all frequencies, whereas this is just a drop of a few frequencies. So look at the blue. This area would be reduced, this area would be reduced, this area would be reduced. But make no mistake, the gain, just because it's reduced, the gain was reduced for both the speech and the noise in these channels. And it was reduced for both the speech and the noise in these channels. And the same for these channels. And that is why digital noise reduction does not objectively improve speech recognition. Okay? It's going to reduce gain in narrower areas. Hey, I'd rather have that. I'd rather, you don't want to do this. I'd rather just reduce it in a couple of channels. So minimize the reduction, but make no mistake, even though I reduce the gain in just this channel, I'm reducing the gain for both the speech and the noise in that channel. See? And that is why digital noise reduction, basically, we should look at it like it gives subjective comfort to the client. And that's very important because that means the client will wear his or her hearing aids more often. Directional mics give objective improvement in speech recognition. So together, they make a good team, a twin-headed approach to speech in noise. So there. Now I can take this out and go.
Did you have a lecture before this one?
I had two more. I had 110 acoustics, and I did that one at 11:30. And then I did anatomy at 1:30, and then I did this one at 3:30, your time. Here it's only now 2:30. I'm on Pacific time, so I'm 2 hours behind you. Thanks a lot for showing up, though, Angela. You always do. And it's always nice to...
I try to. I really enjoy learning from you, and especially today, I feel like I got it.
Well, good. I'm surprised. I'm glad we were able to get through the whole unit today. I figured it would take us the 2 weeks, but we managed to ram through. So anyway, stay in touch. Anybody has any questions, drop me a line, send me an email. I will shut my face now and stop recording here anyway.
See you next Tuesday?
See you next Tuesday. In other words, we'll see you when we look at you.
That's right.